A dangerous chemical leak in Ohio has prompted school closures and evacuation orders in the area. It's happening in Whitewater Township, that's west of Cincinnati. Officials say a rail car's pressure release valve is leaking styrene. That's a toxic and flammable chemical that's used to make plastic and rubber. It can cause headaches, nausea, respiratory issues, and long-term exposure can lead to more serious health problems. Officials say at this point there is no threat of an explosion. This morning, crews are closely monitoring the air quality in that area.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hurting Humanity channel. I wanted to do a video about this chemical leak that occurred once again from a train in Ohio. If that sounds familiar to you, it should, because this is becoming very common in the news. And of course, they want you to believe that it's a coincidence, that chemical leaks from trains just continually happen around large water supplies, around large populations that the Amish actually live in. If you think about where this is going with our society and with them controlling the food and the water, do not think for a second that these chemical attacks are not or don't have anything to do with being able to target the Amish communities by poisoning the air in the area and the water supply and the farmland. Because remember, in a situation with a grid shutdown, how valuable the Amish people will become versus the government, because everybody's going to be forced into compliance with the government for food and water, and the Amish are able to fend for themselves without the need of the government. So they are a target of this tyrannical, satanic government that we have in place. So is it a coincidence that, again, it's in Ohio when the Amish population is so high? No, it is not. And is it a coincidence as well that it's in about 65 miles apart from Palestine, Ohio, where that very infamous train derailment occurred last year, where we saw those horrifying photographs of black clouds in the sky? And of course, deliberately, we had our government gaslight us and work everybody into oblivion because they wouldn't go there. And they said, oh, they're not going to go there and help or do anything for the people there. And of course, they played right into the left-right divide by saying it's a very Republican area, so the Democrats don't want to go and help anybody. And they just gaslit everybody day in and day out instead of civilians saying, you know what, this is sick what's going on. They're politicizing chemicals derailing and polluting the air and the water and people having to evacuate their homes. Somehow, we're allowing them to politicize these things where people aren't feeling bad for the people involved because it's a Trump MAGA area. I mean, the stuff they're getting away with is so ridiculous, and the gaslighting they're using is absolutely pathetic. So the difference between the two, the train derailment in Palestine, Ohio, and this story is that literally, as you saw, literally, they just opened up and let these chemicals out into the air. And specifically, this chemical that I'm talking about is styrene. Styrene is known to be very toxic. Styrene is to be known as what they call a human carcinogen, which means there's a very good chance that if you're exposed to this chemical, that you're very likely to get cancer. Now, we could all look at the stuff they tell us about how we get cancer and what's going to give us cancer, and we can all kind of laugh at it because we know that we're all exposed to cancer every single day via what they're dumping on us from the sky, which is aluminum and barium. But did you know that there's a lot of reports as well that if you actually look at some of the stuff in chemtrails, one of the ingredients is styrene. Okay, so you have silver iodide, styrene, aluminum, barium, as well as other chemicals that get dumped on us every day. So I guess in reality, it's not that much different than what happens from the sky. Just, I guess it's more of a direct hit when it's coming from the ground level instead of the area level. And of course, what else is suspicious about this story is that it's a private company. The train is a private company. So I didn't know that private companies could run railroads without government regulation, but apparently that's a thing these days. But that's all make-believe as well. These private companies, I'm sure if you track the money, you track the receipts, you track documentation, all these private companies, as we all know, go back to BlackRock, go back to Vanguard. The majority of the train derailments all were linked directly to Vanguard. And as most of you know, Vanguard and BlackRock, along with State Street, own pretty much everything. I mean, we're talking about everything in the grocery store, every form of media we consume, everything seems to fall underneath their umbrella. But when they put a private company's name on the train and then say the private company's completely sorry about this, of course, the private company, I'm sure, will be held liable. They'll file bankruptcy, and you'll never hear another word about the story. But we know the government's deliberately causing train derailments. And this is a deliberate chemical leak. It's almost laughable when you see it. It looks like a scene out of a movie. Because it is literally a scene out of a movie, because these things are being planned out. They're planning these out. I've been talking about this for years, how most of these train derailments are happening around large bodies of water, large communities of Amish people, and large areas of farming. And clearly, Ohio seems to be a targeted area. Almost 50% of the state is actually farmland. If you look at farmland as well as livestock in Ohio, 50% of it. And if you ever drive through there, I mean, you can easily confirm that. A lot of farms, a lot of Amish, a lot of people who are self-sufficient. Remember, they're hell-bent on making sure that none of us are self-sufficient. Let's not pretend like they don't know that people like us exist and that they know that we're going to plan every way that we can to avoid what they want to force upon us. So that's part of what they're doing. Right? Think about this. If you're playing a game and you're strategizing, you got to think to yourself, well, what about these people that know what we're doing? Well, they're going to try to do this, right? So obviously we know they plan to take people's weapons away. They plan to take people's free speech away. Thus, it would make it very difficult to expand the awakening of what's actually happening by removing free speech. That's why they're hell-bent on it. They're not hell-bent on it because they care about their own feelings. And they're certainly not hell-bent on censoring free speech because they care about the LGBTQ plus ZYA, okay? They couldn't give a crap about anybody but themselves and protecting their own arses, so to speak. So in addition to the things that I mentioned, we also need to look at the evacuations, right? So we know that there's going to be water contamination, there's going to be air pollution, but they're telling people, again, just like this has been happening a lot, they're evacuating people from their homes. There's been a couple of these already where they're forcing people out of their homes and forcing them into centers, right? Now, these aren't necessarily FEMA camps set up, but we remember in East Palestine, Ohio, how they were forcing people out of their homes. In fact, it looked like a bit of a martial law type scene. They had police officers coming to people's doors telling them, look, you're not allowed to take a chance and stay in your home. You must evacuate, right? Kind of like they did in Lahaina, where they forced people to evacuate and said, we'll get you back in your homes. But most people never ended up back in their homes, did they, in Lahaina? Most of them have permanent residences now known as FEMA camps. And really, that's what this all ends up being, right? We could see a lot of these derailments. We could see a lot of these weaponized weather events, whether it's, fake fires that they start. So it's not fake, but fires that they start and blame on forest fires like they did in Lahaina, or it's these events that happen with trains, or it's these hurricanes, right? Their plan is, I look at the map of the United States of America, right? And they have their own map, right? We look at America, we see America. They have their own version of America and where they plan on having us all sitting by the year 2050, 2030, 2040, right? So they have to move us around. And things like this, well, you might look at it and say, well, that's a little bit over the top. It's just a gas coming out of a train. It's just styrene coming out of the train. Well, don't sell them short of what they're doing. Don't overlook some of these things that might seem like small stories because it's a small area in Ohio. Because lots of damage can be done. Remember the water supplies of a lot of these areas. They don't just, the water supply in an area like Whitewater, Ohio, just like East Palestine, Ohio, is very close to the Ohio River, which is a major source of water supply for many, many people. Right? Many, many states get water supply out of the Ohio River. If you actually Google the distance between Whitewater, where this occurred, and the Ohio River, it's conveniently, coincidentally, of course, 33 miles away. So the Ohio River is just another major source of water that people don't talk about, right? Illinois, Indiana, I think Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania is definitely West Virginia gets water supply, believe it or not, from the Ohio River. Kentucky does. So lots of states use the Ohio River as a resource for water. And you might say, well, that's a small amount of styrene that's coming out directly over there. Who's to say it's going to contaminate the water or not contaminate the water? Don't be over dramatic about it. Well, I think when you see these things, it's not about being over dramatic. It's looking at coincidences versus things that could actually naturally occur, right? Do you think it's a coincidence that a lot of these train derailments are happening in Ohio? Do you think it's a coincidence that they happen around major water supply sources? No. You can't look at it as a coincidence. It's only an hour away from East Palestine. It looks more like when you see something like this, like, hey, that sounds like a direct target to me. It's almost the same type of chemical leak. The other is an explosion. This is a chemical leak. Almost as somebody flipped a switch and turned it on and let it loose. And then you see some of the video clips, you're like, wait a minute, they're spraying chemicals. Literally somebody opened a valve, it looks like, so chemicals could come out. And then the fire departments, they're spraying a hose. You're like, what? Wouldn't somebody have the hazmat suit, the whole thing? Right? Wouldn't somebody go in and shut the valve off? Oh, well, it's a valve leak. Oh, okay, it's a valve leak. They're spraying it with a hose because that makes perfect sense. Huh? Right? But you got to look at these things and say to yourself, okay, these are weird. That's really how I evaluate these stories when I see them. Is there something weird about it? I get it that we could all look at something and say, train derailment, it's got to be them. They got to be doing something. I get it. Trains do derail. I get it. You know, some stuff could go wrong on a train, right? But something like this, where you look at the location, same thing I talking about weaponized weather with Florida, right? They move all the conservatives down to Texas and Florida. They just continually get drilled with these hurricanes. Think it's a coincidence? Then you look at the pattern of the storm. Now all of a sudden the jet stream doesn't exist. Oh, because the Earth's shifting, blah, blah, blah. And it's moving in these weird directions. They want us to believe the narrative that they feed us every single time. But the narrative they always feed us is nothing more than bullcrap. So we have to look at these things through eyes that are not contaminated or corrupted by the mainstream media. That's really because you hear their narrative and what they say, and then they have experts come on and they go, oh, it's not. It sounds like a conspiracy. No, these things happen all the time, and that's all it takes for the simple-minded people to believe what they say. But if you understand, silent weapons for quiet wars, and you realize that the government has turned on the civilians, that's what we're in the middle of right now. People should have woke up in 2020 with the outbreak and said, oh yeah, the government really has turned on us. Look what they're doing. But they're not. They literally are blaming the other political party, working perfectly into the divide and conquer motto that we've all heard about our whole lives, yet people don't believe that they're actually using it on them. They are, right? And we got to look at these things and say, they're really coming after us in all different ways, because remember, like I said earlier in the video, they look at us and they say there's going to be these outliers. They're not going to conform. They're going to try to prepare beforehand because they see what's coming. They see the stuff we're doing. They're trying to get off grid. They're trying to get themselves large supplies of food. Yeah, they have plans in place. I get it. You could expect them with a long grid shutdown to try to come to your door and take food out of your house and have the government say, hey, we're going to take a look because you're going to have to share it with everybody in the community. They got a lot of things in place that we are not even thinking about yet as to ways that they're going to come after all of us, so we can prepare as much as we want. But we got to remember, we can't look at it as if they don't think that we're preparing and we're going to be fine if we prepare. Right? They've got lots of things in place, and destroying and continuing to destroy any independent sources of food and water that's not reliant on them, they will go after. And the Amish are a target. Whether you believe it or not, whether you think the Amish would share with any people out there or not, I'm sure they would. They're a target because they want to force them into compliance as well. So that's one of my theories about this. Again, I looked at the story. I've seen obviously a lot of stories over the last couple of years with derailments. I don't cover every single one. I thought it was very coincidental that it was so close to East Palestine. I saw the video itself. I'm like, how is this even happening? Right? How is this even happening? We have all these other stories of like the grounds exploding, right? You see the one in Texas where like fire just comes right out of the ground and they tell us we got to change the infrastructure of piping underground. I mean, it looks too deliberate. It looks too deliberate. They're there, they're filming it, they're hosing this, and then they tell you, oh, what is that coming out? Is it just like water vapor? No, it's not quite water vapor. It's just like what's coming down from the sky. Oh, no, that's not quite water vapor either. It's got styrene in it. It's styrene, soft plastics, they tell us, made for plastics and rubber, right? That's also a human carcinogen. Don't worry about that. So again, for anyone out there that thinks, hey, I live in the area, I've evacuated, I could get sick, I'm going to sue this private company. Yeah, they probably already filed for bankruptcy because they're probably owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. So a lot of weird things with this story. I wanted to cover it. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.